Hello, class. We'll begin in just a moment. We should have 1 or 2 minutes more. We'll begin. Okay, class, I think we'll begin. My name is Jonathan Webster, and I'll be teaching you for this course on text linguistics. And I'm just going to run through a few items related to the course to begin with. And most of this probably you will have already looked up, but let me go through it in any case. Just to make sure, can I just ask if you are all able to, let me just turn on the chat for a moment so I can see that. Hold on, please. Okay, I just want to make sure, can you, anyone have any difficulty to hear me or to see the screen? If you do, just let me know by the chat, and we try to fix whatever problem, okay? So hopefully it's okay for everyone. The course objectives. What we aim to do in this course is to look at the textual patterns that exist beyond the sentence. So it's more than looking just at like sentence grammars. We're trying to look at the text itself, and by text, we don't mean just written language. We are also talking about any use of language, and some call it discourse. Whether it's written or whether it's spoken, whether it's short or whether it's long, it doesn't matter. We would say that it is the text. It is the utterance. It's what everyone speaks. It's what everyone writes. And so what text linguistics really is saying that what we're going to look at is actually how language is used. We're not going to come up with a grammar for sentences. We're going to look at how language is used overall. And so we're going to assess the contribution of various structures to the texture of a piece of discourse. What ties a text together? Okay, if we're looking at it beyond sentences, well, what makes a text a text? Well, what criteria would you use to judge and say, well, that is a text? Well, this is what we're going to look at. What are the structures that are there in a text that beyond a sentence grammar? And we're also going to look at another very important aspect, and that is the relationship of the text to the context. Text, when we use language, when we speak, we don't just speak in isolation. We're speaking to people. There's people around us. There are circumstances around us. Whether we're speaking like I'm speaking to you now over Zoom, or whether I'm in a lecture hall, all of these are factors. So the situation, the context, it also has a great influence on not only what we produce as far as the text, but how we receive the text, how we understand the text that's been spoken. All right, so those are the three sort of objectives, we might say, of the course. Okay, let me go on to the next coursework. As you've probably seen, I'm sure already, 50% of the assessment is by coursework. And what that includes is the following. An in-class test in week 8. And so, yes, up until week 8, I'm not going to be assessing you, but you will need to be sort of taking part in the kinds of analysis that we're doing. So you'll know how to then do at the end in weeks 9 through 12, when you give a presentation, when you give group work, then you'll need to know how to do that analysis. And we'll be talking about the text that you will be working with. And I will assign a text that each group will be looking at, analyzing that text. Now this is, besides the in-class tests, you have group work, presentation. And that group work involves an analysis of a text that I will provide you. Now, I know the hesitation many students have with the idea of group work, but really for this course it is necessary. Why? Because you're going to be analyzing a text from various perspectives, various dimensions, all right? And so it's very important for you to be able to work with other people, and you will be needing to delegate responsibility for a certain kind of analysis to someone in your group, and another in your group will be doing another kind of analysis on the same text. It's too much for one person. So it is necessary that it should be group work, and we'll decide the group groupings and so forth later. Let's see first how many students we have in the course. And finally, 20% is individual commentary. So besides what you've contributed to the group and the group presentation, which is 20%, you will be writing something related again to that text that you've been analyzing, and that will be your individual commentary, your individual writing, and that will be 20%. So that adds up to 50%, and 50% is exam. And you'll get a better idea of what kind of questions and so forth we look at and how we look at a text as we proceed through the lectures and so forth. At this stage, you probably wouldn't be so sure what kind of analysis we'll be doing. I hope after today, you begin to get some idea. All right, so what I would like to make sure you do is please go on Canvas, and I've already put some things for you to look at. There is an abstract that I've written for text linguistics. I call it a course abstract. It sort of sums up what text linguistics is, and I will be covering aspects of it in the lecture and so forth, but it would be good reading for you to be able to get a broader view of what text linguistics is all about. So I encourage you to read that, please. Now, also in terms of in Canvas, there's a folder for week 1, and in week 1 I've put PDF versions of the PowerPoint. I put a black and white and the color. Black and white in case you print it out, but I think nowadays probably you're not printing it, and so the color would probably be better. The black and white doesn't exactly turn out how I'd like it to look, so I suggest you look at the color. And there's also a survey document there, and I will mention a bit more about that. This survey is something that I'd like you to complete, but I've also put it on Canvas as like a survey. So there is this hard copy document which you could use to fill in, but I would suggest, in fact, that I would like you to do it as like this. It's under quizzes, all right? And it's a survey, and it's an introduction to yourself. And there's various questions and so forth that are asked about you. First question, how would you rate your English language writing ability? All right, so how would you rate it? Just give me some idea, all right? It's not, these aren't test questions. There's 5 questions. And I'd like you, some of them are writing. This is just sort of giving yourself, your English language writing ability, a score. I'd just like to know where you're at from your own point of view, all right, in terms of your writing. Uh, Other questions relate to just introducing yourself, basically. If you've taken any other courses in linguistics, most of you should have. What have you taken, and whether you've taken any any courses with me before, let me know, and at least I'll get to know you, better. Okay. All right. So the topic that we're going to be looking at, uh, topic one, making meaningful choices with whatever the grammar will allow. And let me just read this. This is sort of what we're going to be covering to begin with. M.A.K. Halliday's Systemic Functional Linguistic Theory. It's already two things. Someone I'm introducing you to, M.A.K. Halliday. If you have taken a course with me before, definitely you've heard of him. And systemic functional linguistic theory. Yes, there is a theory behind the way that we're going to approach our study of text. And it is this theory that was developed by M.A.K. Halliday. He describes language as a resource for making meaning. We make meaning to construe the phenomena of experience. In other words, how we see the world, how we understand what's going on, to enact social relationships, how we get along with other people through language. But there's a third, how we actually create the discourse. There's something about the way that we make a text. It's not just the content, and it's not just how we relate to someone. The text itself has an organization, has a way in which it is put together that allows for the flow of information. Language provides the grammatical resources necessary for not only talking about our experience of the world around us and what is going on inside us, but also communicating our attitudes toward and expectations of those with whom we are interacting. It sums up what's going on inside us, what's going on around us, and how we relate to other people. Halliday's systemic functional theory prioritizes the study of function over form. What's form? That's just what most people would just call the grammar, structure. But what Halliday is suggesting is that what we really should be looking at first is the purpose to which we put language, the reason for why we are communicating. The reason is going to explain then the way that we construct it, the way that we structure it. Halliday's systemic functional theory prioritizes the study of function over form. It provides the theoretical, methodological basis for investigating the aesthetic and functional values that differentiate one text from another or one voice from another within the frontiers of the same text. That last sentence is, that's a chunk there, all right? The aesthetic. How we value it, whether we feel it's good or bad, how we regard it. That's the aesthetic. You know, we look at some texts and we look at poetry, we say, oh, it's beautiful. Oh, his speech was, oh, so eloquent. Oh, wow, he really can't speak very well. We do judge texts, not only in terms of the purpose to which they are put, but how well they achieve that purpose, right? So we are interested in how can we investigate that? How can we investigate the way that we not only understand, but how we evaluate language? Because that's how we differentiate texts from each other, on these bases of whether it's good or bad, what's it saying. But even within the same text, well, there may be elements within that text. As he puts it, one voice. There are different voices within the same text, all right? Okay, so this is just an overview of what we'll be looking at today. First, let me introduce a bit about some aspects of linguistics that I'm involved with. And the first is that at CityU, we have what's called the Halliday Center for Intelligent Applications of Language Studies. It was established in March 2006, so it's been around a while, about 14 years. It's the only center worldwide that bears the name of this world-renowned linguist, M.A.K. Halliday. And the idea is to provide a platform for doing the kind of research that comes out of a systemic functional approach. Halliday makes a strong emphasis on what he calls applicable linguistics. Now, if some of you have done linguistics before, you may have heard of sort of different ways of talking about linguistics. You have formal linguistics, some call generative linguistics, some applied linguistics, and applied linguistics usually means, those related to teaching, okay? Functional linguistics, all right? So, but Halliday specifically uses a word that if you try to write it in with Microsoft Word, you will be told that it's not spelled right. Applicable. Halliday says this: I use applicable because applied linguistics has come to function in some kind of opposition to linguistics. It's almost like if you say applied linguistics, it's not real linguistics, all right? That's for language teaching. That's not really doing linguistics. In other words, applied linguistics here, theoretical linguistics over here, and they're different. But Halliday is saying, I don't want to see that sort of separation. I don't want to see that. I'm not working in something that isn't linguistics. So he says, I want to reject that opposition. I want a single concept that unifies the two. And what, in other words, our linguistics, yes, should be driven by theory. There should be a theoretical framework behind it. But at the same time, our idea is that linguistics itself should offer insight that can be applied, that can be usefully applied in the world. I want a general term, Halliday continues, which gives the sense of something that is capable of having evolved in the context of being applied. In other words, by applying the theory, we learn something about the nature of language. In other words, we want to use linguistics for a purpose, yes. In order to apply it, yes. But that application of the theory should feed back into the theory and thus allow us to achieve a better theory of linguistics. The Halliday Center, I'm responsible for 2 journals. One is Linguistics in the Human Sciences. It's the journal that we launched when we began the center back in 2006. And another journal that we are also responsible for is, just a minute. I'm having difficulty to change. Just a moment, please. I'm having difficulty to change the slide. Hold on just a second, please. Okay, that's better. Word. Word is the Journal of International Linguistic Association, and this journal has been around since 1945. By the way, I just noticed that I thought I was plugged in. Again, sorry for these little adjustments that are needing to be made. Hold on, please. Well, just a moment. I have to make some adjustment to my computer. What is wrong with this? Oh, shoot. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. And can I just, again, can I just ask you if everything is working okay? Can someone just reply to me on the chat if you're hearing me okay, if you're seeing the screen okay? Is everything working all right? Good, good. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. All right. And okay, just sorry about that interruption. I thought I had plugged my computer in, but I had plugged into the wrong thing. All right, sorry about that. Okay, back. The other journal. This journal dates back to 1945, and of course, we haven't been responsible for it since 1945, more recently. But the journal itself is very interesting because it dates back to that period where you had many new sort of up-and-coming linguists. If any of you have done sociolinguistics, you may have heard the name William Labov. Well, his first journal paper was in Word. M.A.K. Halliday, his first journal paper was in Word. And so there have been a number of really renowned linguists that have had their papers published in Word. It originated, the journal itself, out of, and it's from the International Linguistic Association, which originated with the Linguistic Circle of New York, which itself included a number of themselves recognized as really very famous linguists. So we've been very privileged to now be responsible for this journal as well. And we have a number of publications that have come out of the center. I have been the editor for M.A.K. Halliday's collected works. That is 11 volumes that of his work that dates back to 1950, around that time. What's been really amazing to me and is that someone whose work is almost dates back 70 years still has relevance, still has something valuable to say. In linguistics, especially within linguistics, very often the theories come and go, and the ideas are changing all the time. And so you can say that the shelf life, the expiry date for theories is very short. But that hasn't been the case with Halliday's systemic functional theory. Functional theory. It has been around, yes, and even the things that he wrote, dating back to 1950s and so around that time, 70 years old, but it still is relevant, still has an insight that we very often find fascinating and interesting to see. That to me is really the value of academic scholarship. What I like to ask, what is its expiry date? If it's very short, then I wonder how worthwhile it is. And that's why that's why you might wonder, why am I in systemic functional theory? Well, that's largely it. I was wanting a theory that I could work in and I could develop, that would be something that wouldn't just be disappearing and of no use in a very short time. I wanted something that had a longer shelf life. And in systemic functional theory, I feel I found that. My own work with Halliday text linguistics, the book itself, and then another book of mine, Understanding Verbal Art, and some aspects of that we will look at in the course too. All right, so I've kept mentioning this person, M.A.K. Halliday. Who is he? He pioneered the development of systemic functional theory. Yes, okay, I've said that already. Interestingly, though, he began as a teacher of Chinese. Yeah, Chinese. No, not English to Chinese speakers. No, he began as a teacher of Chinese for those wanting to learn Chinese, and only later did he become a linguist. He began as a language teacher, but he became a linguist. He studied in China. He did his undergraduate study at Peking University. And later, because that was around 1949, because of the turmoil that was going on in China, he later shifted to working in Guangzhou at what was then called Lingnan University. Today it's called Sun Yat-sen University. And he did his undergraduate study there. He later went on to do his PhD when he went back to UK. He is also the founding head of the Department of Linguistics at the University of Sydney. Now, if you've studied linguistics before, another name which you have to know is Noam Chomsky. Now, look at these two people, Halliday and Chomsky. How are they alike? Well, it's more accurate to say probably how are they different, all right? Let's take a look at how their approach to language is different. Now, let's first look at Chomsky. Now, it's fair to say, I think, that linguists like Noam Chomsky believe that our linguistic ability derives from an innate competence. And that innate competence is logically well ordered. In other words, the ability to use language is something that you're born with. You have it within you. And not only that, it's logically well ordered. Now, that explains why formal linguistics believes it can find sort of a way of describing language which is logical and well ordered and systematic, because that's what they believe is already there. That's what you start with. Now, then, but what happens? You know, we don't usually always talk in such logically well-ordered ways. So where does the fuzziness and the indeterminacy, where does that come from? It's the result of irrelevant performance constraints, misspeaking, Oh, so in other words, you know, the way you talk, yeah, you sometimes doesn't all come out the way you want it to, but that's just your performance constraints, and those are not really significant and important. Halliday takes a very different view, though, because Halliday is saying, okay, the way that you construe your experience, ideationally construing our experience, how you relate to others, interpersonally, enacting social relationships, the purposes to which you put language, the reason why you need language, those are explain why language is inherently fuzzy, because it's so complex. The way that we construe the world, the way that we interact with other people, it is so complex. How can language not be, and itself loaded with indeterminacy and fuzziness? How then can language not be? You see, what we're going to be arguing here is that what is language? Language is making meaningful choices. Text linguistics, really, this is the fundamental idea, that the way, what is language? Accept the way you use language. Accept the way you actually talk. That is language, not some abstract idea of what you think language should be like. It's making meaningful choices. Text is choice. You're making choices when you speak. And so Halliday says this: a text represents a selection within numerous sets of options. You have a lot of choices. And everything that is said presupposes a background of what might have been said but was not. In other words, there's a great potential out there. So the choices that you make presuppose a background of things that you did not choose. That in itself is significant. It's not just the choice that you made, it's the choice of what you didn't do. It's what you choose not to do. Do you get it? A text is a semantic structure. It's meaning. And it's formed out of a continuous process of choice from innumerable interrelated sets of semantic options. You have so many different kinds of choices, semantic options. And he refers to this total set of all these semantic options as meaning potential. What is the meaning potential of language? It's lots of choices, and it's your different sets of choices because they sort of group in different ways, and that's what we're going to be looking at. All right, so your semantic options, your choices, represent a meaning potential. Infinite. Now, I've been making the point that the theory that's going to be sort of driving the way that we look at language is called systemic functional linguistics. Now, very often it's confused, and please never make this confusion, all right? Do not call it systematic functional linguistics. It isn't systematic. It is systemic. What's the difference? What's the difference? When we talk about systemic, we're talking about systems, yes. The systems in the nature of being choices. Systems of choice. Sets of semantic options. We're talking about systems of choice, but what we're saying is that language is not really that systematic. It isn't some logical, inborn, innate competence, knowledge that you have that you just distort whenever you talk. No. Language is the way you use it. It is what you use it for. It is the choices that you're making. It is the making of meaning. And so language is a systemic resource. Now, what does that mean? We talked about sets of semantic options. And so we're going to say that there's sort of different purposes to which you put language. We already have sort of implied them. Now, first thing we're going to say is that this system is characterized by functional diversity. Differences, functional differences. And we see here on the screen, representational, construing experience, interpersonal, enacting social relationships, meaning materializes, the textual. All right, we're going to say that there are three sort of kinds of options. Choices of meaning for how we're going to construe, understand, perceive our experience. Choices for how we're going to enact a social relationship. Choices for how we're actually going to put that all together within the text and express it. All right, so meaning. Meaning, different kinds of meaning, to construe experience, not just construct even, it's construe. How you construe the world. You see, it's not something just like you construct it. When you use the word construe, it's sort of how you perceive it to be. You're making it up, okay? How you see the world is not necessarily how I see the world or how someone else that you know sees the world, right? We all have sort of our way of seeing the world. Well, that's how we construe it. It's not necessarily what's there. Who's to say what's there? It's how we see it, how we perceive it. All right, so we have ways to show that, how we see the world. We are going to call that ideational meaning. All right, so try to learn these terms, all right, ideational. Then we have ways of using language to enact relationships with other people, right? How we get along, how I express to someone else, how I perceive my relationship to them. Are we friends? Well, then there's a way of talking, right, to someone else. Am I the boss and you're my employee? That's another way of talking. In other words, there are different sort of ways of speaking depending on the relationship that we want to sort of project to the other person. Interpersonal meaning. And finally, that last third one, creating the discourse. When you take these two sort of core ways of the purposes to which we put language, to construe the world, to enact social relationships, the fundamentals, right? It's what you're going to say, and it's who you're going to say it to, but there's also how you're going to say it. And that how that text comes together. That's really what we're going to focus on a lot in this course. The textual. All right, so next big word we're going to be using, metafunctions. These are the metafunctions of language. Meta in what sense? Overall. If you're going to describe the purposes to which language is put, it is these three metafunctions overall. And every language has to satisfy these three metafunctions. The representational, the ideational, how we experience the world, how we reflect on the world. But also there's another element to this, it's called the logical. Now, how do we sort of see, because we don't just talk in simple little utterances, we put it together and we see things as a sequence, right? How are they related? How are ideas related one to the other? Interpersonal. How we use language to relate to others. How we express attitude. That's also another aspect of interpersonal. Perspective. Am I doubtful about something? Am I certain? Am I judging it in a particular way? Do I look down on it? Do I look up to it? And finally, how we materialize it, how we put this all together, because meaning is invisible, right? How do you make it visible or audible? We're going to look at different ways in which you do that, how you materialize meaning. Now, as I mentioned, I am the editor of Professor Halliday's collected works. And he one time wrote me a letter. And in that letter, he listed out what he considered to be the 7 distinctive features of SFL. Felt these above all, these were the 7 most important aspects of systemic functional linguistics. What were they? All right, let's take a look. Quantitative studies and probability. Metafunction. Historical context of linguistics. Marxism. Unity of lexis and grammar. Continuity of proto-language. Patterns of analogies, complementarities. Well, the one I'm going to focus on for now is metafunction, because this is fundamental to what we're going to be looking at in text linguistics. Halliday describes a language as being more than a semiotic system. Okay, first of all, before I go further, what is a semiotic system? What is a semiotic system? Anything that is meaningful. So what is meaningful? Well, simplest example, you're driving and you see a traffic light, and red means stop, and yellow means caution, and green means go, right? That is a semiotic system. It makes meaning. All right, there are other things too. How you wear your hair, how you dress. Those are semiotic systems. They express your identity. They express who you are. You see, there's all over. I mean, there's so many different kinds of semiotic systems. So what Halliday is saying is language, though, is more than that. It's not just one of these semiotic systems. It's more than that. It is a system that makes meanings. Makes meanings. A semogenic system. So what makes it special? I really like this quote. It comes from a book the book is called Reinventing the Sacred. It was written by an author, Stuart Kauffman. The quote goes like this: "Thus, while the human mind, central to our human embodied agency, is sometimes algorithmic and sometimes computes, it does some things we do not yet understand. It makes meanings." Makes meanings. What does that mean? How does our language make meaning? Well, Halliday goes on to say that what enables this meaning-making potential in language is the grammar. But he uses another word here. The word he uses is lexicogrammar. Lexico, words, right? Grammar. He's saying that words, grammar, they're really the same thing. In fact, there's a simple word that I'll use that you could use instead of lexicogrammar: wording. Not words, but wording. But what he goes on to say is then thinking about meaning means thinking grammatically. Thinking about meaning means thinking grammatically. But when he talks about grammatically, he's not talking about what we usually think of in terms of grammar. Usually you pick up a grammar book, you have about the tenses and the subject verb agreement and all these kinds of things, right? Yes, that's important, but it's not really all that we mean by grammar. So you have meaning on the one hand, and you have wording on the other. And when we talk about grammar, what do we mean? All right. Now, I'm going to take a break here because I'm going to start into a new sort of aspect of this. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to send them via chat to me. Any comments about anything so far? And we're going to take just about, let's see, it's about 12:47. Let's take him to the top of the hour, 1 o'clock. In the meantime, any questions you have, let me know. I'll then bring it up in when we come back, all right, to the session. All right, so let's pause it here for a moment and let's carry on in about 10 minutes or so. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll begin in around 2 minutes, all right? Begin at the top of the hour. Okay, everybody, let's begin again. And we left off here. What I've been saying is that meaning is going to be realized by the wording. You see, this is the priority that Halliday has set, and that is that we begin with the meaning, what it is you want to use language for. And then you look for how the structures of language, the wordings, make that meaning possible. It's different in other frameworks, theoretical frameworks that in fact go around it quite differently. They begin with sort of the form, and they focus on the form to the expense of looking at the purpose to which language is being put. One of the questions on the chat was about textual meaning. And don't worry, today I'm going to try to give you an overview of the three and what kinds of choices we're talking about. Just very quickly, because you asked, textual, for example, how you begin each, what we call clause or sentence. The choice of how you begin it is going to be significant. Very often it is you're beginning each sentence with information that is already known to the speaker. And what you work up to, what you work toward, is the new information. So it's going to be very important to the listener and to the reader, the flow of information, because information is two kinds. One is information that you know already, old information, given information, what you already heard, and new information, something you didn't know, new. We have given versus new. How are they going to be positioned within the way we speak? We very often begin with the old, we work toward the new. Not always, but that's one aspect of textual structuring. It's how you structure in preparation for the reader or the listener to sort of be able to grasp what is the flow of information. How do we signal new information? We do, and we'll look at how that happens. All right, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I do want to go through these today, and I will be getting to textual meaning in more detail. All right, so let me get back to that. All right, so let's go back to now. Halliday had a mentor, and his mentor was J.R. Firth. J.R. Firth writes this: the whole of our linguistic behavior is best understood if it is seen as a network of relations between people, things, and events, showing structures and systems, just as we notice in all our experience. Structures and systems. Structures, the wordings. Systems, the metafunctions, the functions of language, the options, the sets of semantic options, choices. Now, this network of structures and systems we must abstract from the mush of general goings on, which at first sight may appear to be chaos or flux. In other words, what he's saying is, how do we arrive at these structures? How do we arrive at our idea of what is meaning and what is wording? How do we arrive at this? How do we arrive at these systems of choices? But we only can do so from sort of trying to grasp it, abstract it from, and this is the word he uses, mush. Mush, it's not well defined, all right? Mush of general goings on, which almost seems like chaos, but we've got to try to, what we're trying to do is figure it out. And so what Firth was really advocating for was a systemic linguistics, much as we've been describing, with a sociological component. Systemic in the sense that we aim to discover are systems of language and culture realized in the dialogic text in a specific context of situation. Now let me unpack that. Systems, sets of options, choices, related to language and to culture, related to the text and the context, and observing this taking place in dialogue, conversation, speeches, writings, poetry, any use of language. But all of it takes place in some context of situation. We live and we act as conscious, communicative, we communicate. Human beings in a universe where the realms of matter and meaning, matter and non-matter coexist and interconnect. That probably sounds very theoretical, right? The idea, though, is important. We are thinking. We are communicating. And we do so in the world that is around us, which is made up of both the visible and the invisible, the matter and the non-matter. And it coexists. This is very important. Think of it this way. All right, how do we represent matter and meaning? The meaning, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, it's invisible. You can't see meaning. Matter is something you can see. It's substance, all right? That's the form of language, the form that language takes. That's visible. And I believe that's why some in linguistics focus on that, because it is visible or audible. But Halliday is saying this whole thing is made up of both. And so we can't neglect either. What he's saying is that the difference, matter and meaning, it's a continuum. It's a continuum. It's not two different things, really. They're on a scale at different ends. And as he puts it, the intermediate points defined according to the mix. But there's another way of looking at it, and that is that these two realms, meaning and matter, are sort of like overlapping levels, overlapping strata, we call them. Now think of matter as context, okay? Meaning and context. There's two overlapping strata. They are connected. They're connected, though. And so what is there about context? How can we describe context? Well, let's look at the meta functions, all right? Remember we talked about ideational meaning. What is it that we're wanting to say? Well, you could say that in terms of the context, you have sort of what's happening. What are we talking about? We call it field. Tenor. Who's involved? Who are you speaking to? That's interpersonal meaning. Will depend on who you are speaking to, and how the meaning will materialize in the text. The form that the way that that text will take, how it'll be realized, will depend on how the discourse, how the dialogue, how the conversation is taking place, where, when. And so when we talk about text linguistics, we are not just going to be talking about the text. We will also look at the text in context. And when we talk about context, we will be talking about field, the content, what is being talked about, corresponding to the experiential or the ideational metafunction. Tenor, the interrelationships between those that are interacting. Who is talking to whom? This will relate very much to the interpersonal metafunction. And the mode, the channel, is it spoken? Is it written? Is it a tweet? Is it an email? How is it being communicated? How is the activity taking place? This will relate to the textual metafunction. All right, do you begin to see the framework that we're going to be working in? We're going to be looking at the text, and we're looking at the text in terms of three different kinds of meaning. Ideational, how we experience the world. Interpersonal, textual. But at the same time, how we communicate will depend very much on what we're talking about, who's talking to whom, and how the interaction is taking place. Ruqayyah Hasan. Ruqayyah Hasan was the wife of Professor Michael Halliday. By the way, both of them have passed away in recent years. Professor Hasan, she talks about a bi-directional relationship between, now follow this, on the one hand, the speaker's perception of context. How you perceive the context will activate your choice of meanings, right? This is a Zoom session, and and I'm talking about linguistics, and I'm supposed to be lecturing. And so in this sense, how I perceive the context as the speaker is going to activate certain choices that I'm going to make ideationally, interpersonally, and textually. But on the other hand, how these meaningful choices are realized in the speaking will contribute to the construal of the context. In other words, how do you see the context here? Well, you are going to be influenced in terms of the way you see the context by the way I'm speaking. It works both ways. The language that's taking place is going to cause us to see the context in a particular way, just as the context itself is also going to be activating certain choices. It works both on the other. She calls this the context metafunction hookup hypothesis. She continues, meaning word choices activated by context of situation form an instance of some registral variety whose correlate is some specific category of context. Now, we've all heard of different ways of talking about varieties of language. We have language itself, dialect, right? There's another variety of language. What's the difference? Okay, we're going to call it register. And register is defined by language spoken in a particular context of situation. Got it? How's that different than a dialect? A dialect is defined according to the users. All right, so where you're from, for example, where you're from is going to come across then in a particular dialect, right? It's language defined by the users. Okay, so what is a register? A register is language defined according to the use of language. Each text becomes an exemplar. It's an example of some register, and every register must have some contextual correlate. Every text belongs in a particular context. You cannot look at language without looking at the context in which language is taking place. And you cannot really look at language unless you're looking at how language is actually used, right? That's the whole point of text linguistics. So what is register? Register is Erich Steiner, University of Saarland, Germany. He's well known in terms of the discipline of translation. And he says this: register in particular becomes a key organizing concept linking context and lexicogrammar, something which to my knowledge is not found anywhere else in modern linguistics. I hope you begin to see the way that we're going to be approaching language is rather unique. But I want you to see that it's motivated by what language really is. All right, so meaning, understood as systems of choice. We would then say that the property of language that we are describing here is one of being paradigmatic. What's paradigmatic? Paradigms, categories. So you have categories, different kinds of choices. Okay, let me begin to illustrate this. Someone asked, why do we need ideational, interpersonal, textual? I'm going to try to make an argument here. I'm going to try to make an argument with you for why we need, for example, ideation. How we experience the world. Now, I've mentioned to you, ideation is really divided into two categories, subcomponents. And I'm going to talk about the first one, experiential. The reflective, experiential aspect of meaning. How you reflect on the world, your experience. Okay? Now, how are you going to express that in your choices of wording? Well, first of all, what kinds of processes are taking place? Who initiated the processes? Who's affected by the process? What are the circumstances? Now, there's three things here. Process, choice of process, choice of participants, who initiates, who is affected by it, and circumstances. Now, I think you probably may not see this yet. I hope in a few minutes you will agree with me that it's true. How we experience the world is related very much to process, choice of process, participant, circumstance. When we talk about processes, I have to distinguish between different kinds of processes, all right? So you have processes of doing, okay? You have mental processes, sensing, knowing, seeing, feeling. You have verbal processes. These are processes of saying, behavioral, coughing, sleeping, and existential and relational, being, becoming, having. All right, so different process types. Now, how do we categorize these? Doing, knowing, saying, behaving, existing, relating. How do we decide these? Is it on the basis of the meanings? Well, then, you'd have to admit that basically every verb is different from every other verb, right? Otherwise, we won't have the different verbs. They're somehow different. Now, how do we come up with these categories here? How can we group them like this? Is it just imposing our idea onto sort of the collection of processes that exist in the language? Halliday would argue, no. And this is his argument. They behave differently grammatically. Okay, let's see this. Let's take a process type doing. Now, Halliday gives it the name material processes, all right? Can you remember that? Material processes are doing processes. And what's an example? John kicked the ball. Can I ask this question? What did John do? Can I ask that question? Yes, it's legitimate. Can I say, what did John do to the ball? He kicked it? Yes. All right. Okay, then another category, ER role. Who is the initiator? I use ER role because, for example, if you were saying, for example, do, then you have the doer. Someone says they are the sayer, they are the thinker. All right, so ER, right, always indicates that the one who is in the ER role is the initiator. All right, so can in a doing process, can the initiator be non-human? The car hit the tree. Yeah, sure. Human, of course. All right, last question, last test. Can it take a that clause? You know, like John said that he would go. Can you say John kicked that the ball? Of course not. Of course not. All right, so what did John do? What did X do? Yes. What did John do to the ball? Fine. It can be non-human, can be human. All right, let's take the next one. Mental. Let's take a mental process like C. All right, mental, clearly mental. John saw the bird. Can I say, what did John do? And you answer, he saw the bird. No. You can say he's looking at the bird. That's different. If you say he saw the bird, you can't say, what did John do? He saw the bird. It's not a doing kind of process. It's different. You can't say, what did John do to the bird? He saw it. No, not at all. Cannot. Grammatically, you cannot. See? Doing processes, sensing processes, mental processes are different. They behave differently in the language. Can the initiator be non-human? Can you say the clock thinks it's time to leave? No. Must be human, must be human-like, can have a sense of consciousness to be able to sense. Can it take a that clause? John saw that I was cold. Yes, it can. All right, so Halliday's point is this. Doing, sensing, they are different, not just in meaning, they are different in terms of the way they behave in the grammar. Let's take verbal processes. John told a joke. What did John do? He told a joke. Fine. What did John do to the joke? He told it. No, cannot. You can say, what did John do to the joke? He killed it. No, but you can't say he told it. All right, in that sense, verbal processes are somewhat like material processes, somewhat like mental, but they're different. All three different. And in terms of the initiator, now, whereas we said the clock can't think it's time to leave, the clock can tell me, though. It can communicate. Can it take a that clause? Yes, it can. Last one, relational processes. What did John is smart. What did John do? Absolutely not. All right, cannot. Can it be non-human, human? Yes. Can it take a that clause? In fact, it can. All right, so the point being, do you see that these process types are all distinguishable? We treat them differently in the grammar. is not just in terms of meaning. It's in terms of how they behave, in terms of choices. And how we tested for this? Well, 3 different questions. Can you ask, what did X do? If there are 2 participants, what did X do to Y? Must the initiator be human-like or have a sense of consciousness? Can the process project, like take a that clause in English? All right, now that, on the basis of that, we can distinguish these different process types. Thinking about meaning, what did Halliday say? Means thinking grammatically. Where there is a difference in meaning, there is going to be a difference in grammar. You first look for the meaning, you first look for the function, and then you look for the structure, the wording that realizes that meaning. That's the set of priorities here. Now, I think I can make the point. Here's my argument. And I'm going to base my argument on a part of a speech that was given by Donald Tsang, former Hong Kong SAR chief executive. And he gave this speech 2011. John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum, Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government, okay? Now this speech, now I've tagged it by paragraph and by clauses. You can ignore that for the time being, all right? Just follow along as he speaks the text, all right? And we're just gonna look at what you see on the screen, not the whole speech, just this part. So now I'm gonna be playing it, and if there's any problem with hearing it, please let me know, all right? Please let me know.
Some of you may know that this year is also an important anniversary for China. It is the 100th anniversary of the revolution that overthrew the Qing dynasty and ended millennium of dynastic rule. 100 years ago today, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the man most closely associated with that event, was making his way back home to China from the United States. He had been here in the US trying to raise funds for the further attempts to revolt in southern China. He was in Denver when the news reached him that the revolution had started without him on the 10th of October in Wuhan, a city in a conservative center of China. At one level, you can read that as a lesson on the need for humility, that those who seek to lead events must accept that often the events leads them. And at another level, it is a reminder of the power of ideas to move men to action well beyond the reach of those who had the ideas.
Okay, and I'm assuming you all could hear that. Sorry, I didn't realize that if I click on the chat window or I click on anything, it stops the video, all right? So sorry about that. I'll remember for that next time. But it did continue, and I hope you listen to it. Now, first thing I want you to notice, I'm going to sort of categorize his speech into these 3 sort of process types. Sensing, you may know, you can read, must accept, all right? Sensing, mental processes. Being, relational processes. The verb to be, the verb to have, the verb to become. And finally, doing processes. All right, so, and I'm going to list out the choices that he's made here. Now, I'm going to focus on the doing processes. And the doing processes, I notice, are something about them. You go down the list. If you go down the list, you begin to see something. And that is that revolution overthrew, News reached, revolution again. Event leads, the power of ideas, the idea, a mechanism. All right, now the processes. Who is the initiator of these processes? The initiator of these processes are not people, right? Not people. They're events, they are institutions, they are abstractions. They're not people. Now, there's another quote within his speech, and he says this: once more we hear the echo of Emerson, that things are in the saddle and ride mankind, rather than we feeling that we are the masters of our fate. Uncertainty, insecurity, loss of economic hope, widening inequality, these breed loss of trust in the institution of government. That loss of trust gives ground for the grammar of discord to displace the grammar of discourse. But notice something, and I've highlighted it in yellow. The quote that he gives from Emerson: things are in the saddle and ride mankind. What's it mean? He goes on to say, rather than we feeling, we are not the masters of our fate. We are not driving. Rather, things are driving what's happening. We are being driven. Things are in the saddle and ride mankind. Things are the initiators. They are the doers. And we are the ones that are the affected. Remember what we said about how we're going to be looking at this? We said we look at it in terms of the choice of processes. Doing. Who is the initiator? It's not people. Who is affected? People. You see, that's the way Donald Jung, that's his ideology, so to speak. That's the way he sees the world. That's the way he construes the world. And that way of seeing the world then comes through in the choices that he makes in his speech, because that's how he sees the world. So how he talks, his language is going to be influenced by the way he thinks, the way he construes the world. All right, now, I think this can even be made clearer if we take a different example. And this is a commencement address that was given by Susan Rice. She, at the time, was the permanent representative for the United States to the United Nations. She later was Obama's national security advisor, and she more recently was being thought of as one of the potential vice president candidates for Biden. Okay, Susan Rice. This is her commencement speech. I did the same thing with her speech that I did with Donald Jung. I broke it up into sensing, being, and doing. All right? Now I really calculated this one, all right? And I was very interested in terms of the ER role. Now you remember what I mean by that, right? The initiator. Who is the one that is? Who is the doer? Who is the censor? Who is the sayer? And so forth, right? Now, is it I, first person? Is it you, second person? Is it we, first person plural? And then I grouped everything else under this fourth category, other. Look at what we observe from the numbers here. 80% of the doing, okay, 79%, nearly 80% of the doing is being done by I, you, and we. People. And half the speech is doing. And even if I take a look at all the process types, still 70+% are being done by I, you, we. Well, I, you, and we figure very prominently in this speech, don't we? And it's being done by and being sensed by and being said by I, you, we, people.
So much change has transpired just in my adult lifetime, and you will see so much more in yours. But it doesn't just happen. Progress is the product of human agency. Things get better because we make them better. And things go wrong when we get too comfortable, when we fail to take risks or seize opportunities. Never trust that the abstract forces of history will end a war, or that luck will cure a disease, or that prayers alone will save a child. If you want change, you have to make it. If we want progress, we have to drive it.
All right. Do you see how different their ideologies are? And their ideologies, though, come through in the choices that they make, the choices of process, participant, who is doing what, who is being affected by it, and what is the nature of that process. Doing, sensing, what? It's about doing. But for Donald Jung, it's not people that are the doers. It's events, it's abstractions, it's things. For Susan Rice, it's people. We are the agents of change. All right, so in other words, what I'm saying is that the way you see the world is going to be evident from the choices that you are making in language. They reveal the ideology that you're coming from. We make meaning. And we do so in terms of making meaningful choices. But there's another aspect to this, and that is making your language as it makes you. Yeah, it's true. We, yes, influence the way we see the world is how it comes through in our language. But at the same time, do you realize that almost subliminally, when you listen to Donald Jung, what you're getting from him is not even what you're hearing from him is is that idea. People are not the doers. But when you hear Susan Rice, that's all you're hearing. People are the doers. I, you, and we. And that influences, in other words, the way we think influences our choices in language, but at the same time, the way we use language then communicates that to others. And so what you're hearing is that ideology. Even if it wasn't explicitly stated, nonetheless, that would be what was being communicated. All right, now, I said ideational meaning included logical meaning, right? Okay, logical. What do I mean by logical? Comes down to, in terms of the wording, what are the logico-semantic relations? Are there dependent clauses? How are the clauses combined? Now, how meaningful is that, you're going to say, right? Now, let's see. First of all, when we talk about sort of the logic, I want you to think in terms of whether it is symmetrical or asymmetrical. Parataxis. Please learn that word. We'll probably be using it quite a bit, all right? In this example, John enjoys reading and he likes swimming. You have two ideas here. They are grammatically equal. John enjoys reading, he likes swimming. And you combine them with a conjunction, and. That is a paratactic joining of these two clauses. This is my father who is teaching here. Now, one of these clauses is the main clause. This is my father who is teaching here. We say that's a dependent clause. And the relationship between these two is asymmetrical, hypotactic. We can also indicate it by this arc that is pointing from the dependent clause to the main clause. We also can call the main clause the alpha clause and the dependent clause the beta clause, all right? Another word to describe this would be to say that this is a non-restrictive relative clause. Non-restrictive. Some say non-defining relative clause. Why is that? Well, because what you're saying is, this is my father. Most likely you have one father. Who is teaching here is not defining which father, it is simply giving you more information, right? That he teaches here. Now that is what it means by a non-restrictive relative clause. The beta clause provides additional information related to something said in the main clause. All right, let's say it like this then. This is my brother, comma, who is studying here. Now, we use punctuation. What do we use punctuation for? We use punctuation to mean that this is a non-restrictive relative clause. Now, this could be confusing because this is my brother, comma, who is studying here. How many brothers do I have? If it is a non-restrictive relative clause, and if we use that comma, how many brothers do we have? One. One brother. Okay? It's non-defining. Just like this is my father. We cannot assume that your brother is your only brother, but here, in this sense, putting it with a comma, that's what we're indicating. We do know. And we just want to, what you're saying is, this is my brother who's studying here. Only one brother. Take away that comma. This is my brother who is studying here. Now it becomes a restrictive relative clause, defining relative clause. Because how many brothers do I have? More than one. More than one. All right, so this means that who is studying here is defining brother. It's not another clause with additional information. This is actually limiting. The brother is the head noun, and it is post-modified by who is studying here. In other words, that clause, who is studying here, is now functioning as a post-modifier to brother. It is defining which brother. It is no longer functioning really like a clause. It's functioning as part of a noun phrase of which brother is the head. Okay, some more about logical meaning. We distinguish between paratactic and hypotactic, right? We're also going to look at it from another point of view, and that is how then these two clauses, whether paratactic or hypotactic, kind of logico-semantic meaning is implied by the connection that you've drawn between the clauses. In the first case, elaborating. Elaborating, you clarify, you make a restatement, you give an example. Now, these would be like this. There are three components of meaning, colon. They are ideational, interpersonal, textual. This would be elaborating. This is simply giving you sort of a more specific statement of what the three components are. A non-defining relative clause, this is my father, comma, who's teaching here, that is also elaborating, but hypotactic. We just looked at that. What else do you have? Extending. Very often you have conjunctions like and, or, and but, which express an extending kind of relationship. I will leave soon, but you can stay. These conjunctions join clauses together. They are paratactic. They are extending. You just keep on adding different ideas together. It also can be hypotactic. He went home. That's the alpha clause, instead of going out with his friends, like that. Okay? Enhancing. Enhancing relates more to like the circumstances. Where, when, why, how. We saw him off at the airport. Then we returned home. A sequence here. It's describing time. Hypotactic. When John arrives, we will eat dinner. The last, direct speech. Tom said, I'll be away next week. That's paratactic. Indirect speech is hypotactic. You have a that clause. Tom said that he'd be away next week. All right, so let me wrap it up. You have paratactic and hypotactic. Paratactic is symmetrical. Two evenly balanced, same sort of, grammatically, they are the same kind of structure. They are equal. All right. Hypotactic, not equal, asymmetrical. One is main, one is dependent. But then you can be elaborating, you can be extending, you can be enhancing, or you can be projecting. All right, now, before we take a break, I want to illustrate the point. Why is it important? All right, why do we look at logico-semantic relations? What I'm trying to do today with you is, I'm sort of trying to tell you this is the way that we're going to be analyzing text. But what I'm trying to make an argument for is that it really does make a difference. Okay, now Obama is considered to be an eloquent speaker. Okay, I think most Americans, no matter their political point of view, would still say his speaking style is quite eloquent. I'll go back a number of years, and this was when he was still not president, and he was still competing with Hillary Clinton, and he was giving this speech. It was, at the time, it wasn't at all certain whether he would be the candidate for his party or not. And he gave this speech on a night that he had sort of lost a battle with Hillary Clinton. But then it's considered to be one of his best speeches. In fact, the speech inspired the singer will.i.am, if any of you have heard of the Black Eyed Peas, to put together this Emmy Award-winning music video, Yes We Can. Now, what I'm going to argue with you is that the logical structuring here made a difference. It made it almost like music. First of all, before I'm going to play a bit of it, but before I do so, take a look at, this part is toward the end of his speech, all right? It's the last sentence, basically, the last sentence. Very long sentence, as you can see. Now, normally you'd think, wow, such a long, complicated sentence, that's not going to be good. Now, what made it good? So tomorrow, as we take this campaign south and west, as we learn that the struggles and so on, we're going to see that there's a structure here. There's a logical structure here that makes a big difference.
We know the battle ahead will be long, but always remember that no matter what obstacles stand in our way, nothing can stand in the way of the power of millions of voices calling for change. We have been told we cannot do this by a chorus of cynics, and they will only grow louder and more dissonant in the weeks and months to come. We've been asked to pause for a reality check. We've been warned against offering the people of this nation false hope. But in the unlikely story that is America, there has never been anything false about hope. For when we have faced down impossible odds, when we've been told we're not ready, or that we shouldn't try, or that we can't, generations of Americans have responded with a simple creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out to the shores of pioneers and pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new frontier,
And a king who took us to the mountaintop, pointed the way to the promised land.
Yes, we can to justice and equality. Yes, we can to opportunity and prosperity. Yes, we can heal this nation. Yes, we can repair this world. Yes, we can. And so tomorrow, as we take the campaign south and west, as we learn that the struggles of the textile workers in Spartanburg are not so different than the plight of the dishwasher in Las Vegas, that the hopes of the little girl who goes to the crumbling school in Dillon are the same as the dreams of the boy who learns on the streets of LA.
We will remember that there's something happening in America.
That we are not as divided as our politics suggest. That we are one people. That we are one nation. And together we will begin the next great chapter in the American story with three words that will ring from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you.
All right, now look at that last sentence. I'm going to highlight a few things here. So tomorrow, as we take, as we learn. Notice the pairing, all right? So you have two things, as we take, as we learn. That the struggles, that the hopes, another pair. We will remember that there is something, one, that we are not divided, not as divided, two, that we are one people, three. You have pairs and you have triplets joining together. You have 47G, we will remember, and then 47M, we will begin. So you have these pairings of, and if we take a look then at the sort of the structure here, as we take, as we learn, now that's paratactic. Then we have another pair, as we learn, that the struggles, that the hopes, that's paratactic. Now that whole thing at the beginning though is hypotactically related to what follows. So as we take, as we learn, all of this hypotactically related to preceding, we will remember that there is something, that we are not as divided, that we are one people, that we are one nation. Do you see the structure here? The point being here is that, in fact, it almost becomes like, that's why this logical semantic structure creates a almost kind of music. That's what made it possible then to put it to music. It has this basic underlying structure that gives it a sense of symmetry, that allows us to sort of see the structure. And as we hear these pairings and these triplets, it almost is, you could say, almost like poetry. The point being, there is a craft to it. There is a design to it. It's not just one complicated sentence. It's a sentence that's very carefully crafted to have pairs and triplets in such a way as to give it sort of a dynamic quality that builds. And that's why it's his concluding sentence. Now, this is if you look at Obama's speeches, this is quite characteristic. He will end a speech with this really very complicated, long sentence with so many clauses, but one that will have a structure to it that is so clearly a logical structure. Take a look at this one.
This is our chance to answer that call. This is our moment. This is our time to put our people back to work and open doors of opportunity for our kids, to restore prosperity and promote the cause of peace, to reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth that out of many we are one, that while we breathe, we hope, and where we are met with cynicism and doubt and those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Now, did you notice that it was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3? There's a rhythm there, and that's why as you listen to it, you could hear his voice. It got louder, he speeded up, the tempo became faster. Yes, that's almost, it has a rhythm. It has a tempo. It has a volume. It has a crescendo to it, like music. But what's driving that? What's driving that is the logical structuring of the way these clauses are put together. What we call the taxis relations, the parataxis, the hypotaxis. Now, when you look at a text, what you have to appreciate about it is not just what the person is saying, but also how those ideas are then put together in a logical semantic way that allows for this kind of dynamic, eloquent quality. Now, I wanted to illustrate before I know I'm going a bit over the time before we have a break, but let me try to finish this part about logical semantic, all right? Remember I talked about rank shifting, and this is my brother, and I said that who is studying here, that's defining which brother, and so that is sort of a post-modification. You're taking a clause and you're sort of downgrading it to the level of a post-modifier within a noun phrase. Now you'll notice that is also occurring within Obama's speech. Those who tell us that we can't, that is what we would call a rank shifted clause. It's describing those. And so that clause, who tell us that we can't, all of that is sort of captured within a phrase, a noun phrase. And so we have parataxis, we have hypotaxis, we have rank shifting. All right, now, I'm sorry I've gone beyond what I would like to normally for allowing a break. So it's about, good grief, it's almost 2. All right, let's take a break, please. About 10 minutes. So can I ask you to begin again at 10 after 2, all right? 10 past 2, thank you. In the meantime, anything that you want to ask in the chat, please feel free to do so, okay? Okay, let's come back, and I hope that what you can see I'm trying to do in this first lesson, give you an overview of what we are going to be looking at when it comes to looking at a text. And it does have as its foundation a particular theoretical approach called systemic functional linguistics. And systemic functional linguistics basically looks at language as being comprised of three metafunctions. And the ideational. The ideational includes the experiential, which is realized in wording in terms of choices of process, participant, circumstance. Now that sounds so simple. Process, participant, circumstance. But I believe that it really, and I hope that I'm making the case with you that in fact, yes, the way we speak, the choice that we make of process type and who is the initiator and who is the affected and the circumstances, they reveal how we construe the world. They reveal our ideology. They are the channel by which we convey to others the way we see the world. And can mean quite different outcomes, as we saw with Donald Chung and Susan Rice. All right, so I hope that's clear. And then the other logical semantic relations of parataxis and hypotaxis, and we'll talk more about this, of course, throughout the semester, and you'll be doing some of that, and you'll get a better idea of what those relations, elaboration, extension, enhancement, projection, what they are, and what's paratactic, what's hypotactic, what's rank shifting. Those will become clear, but what I'm trying to impress on you is the fact that yes, the way that we relate the ideas together does make a difference in terms of how that message comes across. And in many ways, the eloquence of Obama, a lot of it lies in the way he uses parataxis and hypotaxis. So that is an aspect of it. And we'll take a look and we'll see, for example, one of the criticisms of Donald Trump is that he is largely paratactic and not hypotactic, and lacking in this particular, what many would regard as an eloquent way of speaking. So the lack of logico-semantic relations makes a difference. All right. So that's what we've sort of looked at so far. We'll take a look now interpersonal. And interpersonal, what's that entail? To begin with, again, you're going to probably think, wow, this is so simple. All right. It doesn't, where's the meaning in this? All right. So for example, I want you to think about when you are engaging in a conversation with someone else. You are in an active exchange, right? Exchange in the sense of you're exchanging meaning. What else are you exchanging? Well, it could be information. All right, information in the sense of, if I'm giving you information, what is it that I normally do? I give you a statement. All right, it's a declarative. This is LT3. What's the name? 320, right? I think. All right, sorry. This is text linguistics. All right, so that is a declarative. It's a statement. I'm giving you information. I can demand from you information. In other words, I want to be the recipient of information. So I ask a question. I demand information. All right. But not only information do we give and do we demand, we can also give And Halliday uses a word here, goods and services. All right. It sounds like from a business course. All right. We can give goods and services. We can make an offer. Would you like tea? In other words, we make offers and we make requests. Imperatives. Close the door. That's an imperative. All right. So it is a command. It's a request. Do something that I want you to do. All right. So this is the nature of language, and it is an active exchange. It is the way we relate to other people. We are asking them for, or we are giving to them. Now, come back to how this comes through in language. When we think about then the use of language, now this is not all there is to interpersonal meaning. This is just but one aspect of it, but an important aspect. And that is, in English, it is summed up by what we call the mood element. I've never quite liked that word choice, all right? Because mood seems to be like, are you in a happy mood or a sad mood? No, it's not mood in that sense. It's a different meaning altogether. Mood here refers to two elements in grammar, subject, the grammatical subject, and the finite verb. What's the finite verb? The finite verb, what makes it finite? Primary tense, all right? It is restricted in terms of time, all right? So we have the subject and we have the finite verb. Now, those two elements are very important in determining whether we are telling the other partner in our exchange whether we are giving or whether we're demanding. Think of it. If I'm giving information, John bought bread, where is the subject? Begins with the subject. The finite verb, carrying primary tense, follows subject, finite. If I ask a question, what happens? Well, then the finite element, now expressed by did John buy bread? Well, they've switched order or the sequence. All right, so we have now finite and then followed by the subject. And if I'm demanding goods and services, buy bread, no finite or subject. So it's the sequencing of them, or their presence or absence of the mood element. So the subject and the finite, Halliday puts in English, in the English language, the finite element and the subject belong under what's called the mood. All right, so mood is one aspect, all right, of interpersonal meaning. Another is attitude. All right, so you have mood. What is mood? Subject and finite, giving or demanding information or goods and services. And how do we capture attitude? Modality. What's modality? Use of modal auxiliaries, for example. I will go, I may go, I can go. It can mean probability, possibility. These are elements of modality. Now, okay, listen to this speech by Obama. Again, just an extract of the whole speech. It's a speech that he's giving to Congress when he was president, and he had not a very good relationship with Congress at the time. And so I want you to listen to it for his attitude. How is it interpersonal? All right. What is their interpersonal relationship? Now, what I want you to pay attention to is the use of modality. All right. Notice he'll use should, will. Pay attention to the use of his modal auxiliaries. All right. Sorry.
I am sending this Congress a plan that you should pass right away. It's called the American Jobs Act. There should be nothing controversial about this piece of legislation. Everything in here is the kind of proposal that's been supported by both Democrats and Republicans, including many who sit here tonight. And everything in this bill will be paid for. Everything. The purpose of the American Jobs Act is simple: to put more people back to work and more money in the pockets of those who are working. It will create more jobs for construction workers, more jobs for teachers, more jobs for veterans, and more jobs for long-term unemployed. It will provide a tax break for companies who hire new workers, and it will cut payroll taxes in half for every working American and every small business. It will provide a jolt to an economy that has stalled and give companies confidence that if they invest and if they hire, there will be customers for their products and services. You should pass this jobs plan right away.
All right. Now, when you listen to this speech, what's his attitude? What's the attitude of Obama? Well, go back to look at the "you should." Now, you can see it somewhat in his face, right? Facial expression looks very stern. You can see it in the pointed finger. All right. You should pass this job plan right away. But the use of should, obligation, that is what he's putting on to Congress. You should pass this. But should has two meanings. One is obligation, you should pass. The other is should be. That's probability, all right? Should be nothing controversial. So there is the sense of obligation that he's putting on them. And that's how he begins and that's how he ends, all right? And should pass, that was their obligation to pass this bill. Notice something else. He keeps repeating will, will, will. What does that express? That expresses his certainty. That expresses this will happen, all right? So how does he come across then in this speech? He comes across as being in a position to tell these people what to do with even that pointed finger. Now that expresses something of a relationship, right? And at the same time, his attitude is one of such certainty. Will, not possibility, will. Finally, textual meaning. Let's, hopefully I can deal with some of this today so that we have covered the three metafunctions. And textual, what's covered in textual meaning? Well, there's two things here. One is theme, and the other is information. Now, let me illustrate these. What is theme? Well, it's been called different things. The starting point of the message, the departure point of the message. It's what the speaker wants to talk about. Theme orients the clause within the context. Thematic choices relate to the method of development of the text. Well, it seems quite a few things, right? But the first thing, it is the starting point of the message. It's how you begin each clause. Each clause, how you begin it. And that's a choice that you're making, right? What the speaker wants to talk about. What we're saying is that what you put first is typically the topic of what you want to talk about. It fits it within the context of what was said before, and it relates to the method of development of the text. It shows you how that text is developing. It gives it a structure, an organization. So, what is theme? Theme is the initial grammatical element. Initial grammatical element. What do I mean? I mean it's not the first word. It would be a grammatical element like the grammatical subject. Or it could be the verb, as in close the door. All right, so it is the initial grammatical element, and there's another element though here, true, which needs to be mentioned, and that is the focus. All right, and the focus is, in English, we have sort of an intonation pattern here. As we're talking, it's sort of level. Then we sort of tend to, toward the end of a clause, we tend to go up and then come down. And where we tend to go up intonation-wise and come down is signaling new information. We call that the focus. So two elements within the clause. One is the theme. That's usually, you begin with what you want to talk about. Focus typically toward the end of the clause, and indicating that's new information. And so theme is very closely related to the flow of information. All right, some examples of theme. John, the grammatical subject. John's already left. Yesterday. Okay, this adjunct at the beginning indicates time, circumstance. We discussed the financial arrangements. We can even put the complement first, his spirit, they could not kill. And it would be, for example, in this case, the subject, grammatical subject, people who live in glass houses. Well, that who live in glass houses is rank shifted, part of that noun phrase, which makes the grammatical subject, people who live in glass houses. The green, what we've highlighted, is new information. John's already left. Yesterday, we discussed the financial arrangements. You see, we put the highlighting intonation-wise on the new element. But theme is sort of packaged together all those sort of metafunctions. And for example, when I say, but Mary, I do love your cooking. Notice what comes first. But. What's but? What purpose does but perform? But is textual. It relates to what was said before, right? Textual. It's a conjunction. Comes first. Mary. Well, what's the Mary here? Mary, I'm not talking about Mary, am I? Mary is not the subject. I'm talking to Mary. It's a form of address. It is interpersonal. We call those vocative, all right? When you're talking to someone, you call them by name, all right? Mary, but Mary, I. Now here's the grammatical subject, I. And so we can say that in this case, we've had textual theme, interpersonal theme, and an ideational theme. All three metafunctions sort of packaged there at the beginning. And usually in this order, so that you have textual first, relates to what was said, then interpersonal, relate to who you're talking to, and then what you want to say. But there are some sort of complications here, all right? A bit more complicated than like that. For example, we have some so-called special thematic structures. In the example here, it's John I want. All right, now I want you to look at that. What are you saying? When I say it's John I want, why don't I just say I want John? I want John. Why do I say it's John I want? What are you implying? What's the meaning? Well, the meaning is that you probably were thinking someone else. When I say it's John, what I've done is I have used a predication, it's John, and I've put that at the beginning. And now it's not old information. In fact, it's saying that this is new information. It's John I want. Notice something about how we construct that in English. It's John. What's the it mean? It is a dummy subject, right? It has no meaning. In fact, that whole clause, it's John, it is John. The whole point of putting that structure there, that predication there, it is John, is so that John is at the end of a clause and receives that intonation that he needs in order for the speaker to know that he's the new information. It's John I want. You see how we do that? When I say it's John I want, how do I get the intonation on John? Well, by creating a clause that basically has no meaning, just so that John is put at the right end of it, at the end, is John. So he'll come across with the intonation that indicates he's new information. Not what you were thinking, not someone else. All right? That is a special thematic construction. Now, there is another one. In the example here is, for example here, if I say what I need is a new car, why don't I just say I need a new car? I need a new car. What's special about saying what I need is a new car? It gives it a sense that it is exclusively this and this alone. I don't need anything else. What I need. Now notice what have I done at the beginning there. What I need. It's a clause. Well, all the elements of a clause. I need what? It has participants, it has a process, all of that, what I need, and I create what we call a nominalized structure. It becomes basically a noun phrase. Like it's a clause that has been shifted in rank down to the level of a phrase. It's put into the subject position, begins WH word, what I need, and then followed by the verb to be. And that verb to be is just like an equal sign, and what follows it, that exclusively, this and this alone is what I need. So there's these special thematic structures that have a very special, specific meaning. Now, of course, you make a choice of what you put first in each clause, and then, but it's a progression of choices, right? I mean, you have a text, and so you have one clause after another, each of those clauses. So what are the choices that you are making as you proceed through the text? There is a progression of choices of what you put as theme. Now, again, theme here, remember, it's not just like theme is in what is the main idea. Yes, it's what we want to talk about, but theme in the sense of let me give you the sense of if I'm looking at poetry and I'm saying, what's the theme of this particular poem? That's not what we mean here, right? Theme has a special use here. It is what you begin the clause with. Now, I want you to notice that this relates very much to the flow of information. Now, there's three possibilities that I mentioned here. One is linear, continuous, derived. Let me illustrate these. The first one. And I'm going to illustrate with this sort of text from an old report about what was City University back then, City Polytechnic. And this begins, the genesis of the City Polytechnic of Hong Kong. Now that's theme, right? That's the theme. Where's the focus? The genesis of the City Polytechnic of Hong Kong lay in the report of a committee appointed by the governor, da-da-da, all right? What's the focus? The report. What's the theme? The genesis of the City Polytechnic of Hong Kong. Well, what's in the next sentence? In the next sentence, that new information now becomes the old information. Do you notice? Let me get this chat window out of the way. Notice how the new information becomes the old information. The genesis of the City Polytechnic of Hong Kong lay in the report of a committee. That new information now in the second sentence, that becomes theme. So the new becomes the old. What was the focus of the first sentence becomes the theme of the second sentence. Likewise, in 2b, there should be a substantial increase in the provision of places for tertiary education. That new information becomes the theme of the next one. What are the measures recommended for achieving this? There's a flow of information. The new becomes the old. The focus becomes the theme. And that's a linear thematic progression. Now let me show you an example here from a journal article. And in this journal article, notice how the first sentence begins. Over the past 40 years, species have been extending their ranges toward the poles. All right, so the focus of the first sentence, the first clause, 1A, extending their ranges toward the poles. And the populations have been migrating, developing, or reproducing earlier in the spring than previously. All right, so 1A, the focus, extending their ranges toward the poles. 1B, the focus, earlier in the spring than previously. Now notice what happens in the next sentence. These range expansions, focus of 1A, and changes in the timing of seasonal events, the focus of 1B. Both of these are combined together to become the theme of the next sentence. In other words, the choice of what you put first is very much related to the flow of information. The focus of the previous clause becomes the theme of the next clause. The new information now becomes the old information, and you put the old at the beginning and you put the new toward the end. English, speakers of English, when they read, when they listen with this flow of information, this expectation of the flow of information. They have an expectation of this. But it doesn't mean that that's the only way to have a thematic progression. Now, in this example, the two are the Collins-Cobild English Dictionary. You're comparing two dictionaries. Now notice, as it proceeds, both are third editions. Both have been published in 1995. They are up to date, both. What are you doing? You are repeating the same thing as theme. It is a continuous thematic progression. And very often in a text which is comparing or contrasting, you keep putting at the beginning what it is you're comparing and contrasting. And the new information is how they are similar or how they are different. Now, in a speech that Malala gave at the United Nations, notice her use of thematic progression. In paragraph 13, first of all, she begins with a very interpersonal theme, dear friends. Then notice you have the Taliban, they, the terrorists, they, very continuous thematic progression. Again, paragraph 14, dear sisters and brothers, again, an interpersonal theme to begin with. I, and then she shifts to this. And what does that do? That continuity of theme choice gives a certain continuity to the text. It holds it together. We can say gives it a certain cohesiveness, because you're beginning each of these clauses all the same way. It ties the text together. It gives it a sense of cohesiveness. Very interesting about Malala's speech. What I did here is I put all the sort of how the theme choice, all right? And in paragraphs 1 through 15, now the whole text I think is something like 32 paragraphs. And I'm looking at the top 10 topical themes. Now this means themes that what it's about, all right? And I did a word cloud. So what stands out is what was repeated most frequently. I. Do you see any we here? Now look at paragraphs 16 through 34. Sorry, 34 paragraphs. We. And I is so small. Now what happened? You see how the first half of her speech was all very much first person, her story. But then almost halfway through the speech, it shifts to it becoming about we. connecting with her audience, and it's becoming first person plural, we. Yeah, there's 3 instances of I, but for the most part, it's about we. You see how it has shifted. But her speech then has 2 sort of parts to it. The first part, very cohesively, is about first person, I. And the second part is very cohesively about first person plural, we. So the text, we begin to see sort of the texture of the text. We begin to see how the text was put together. All right, now, one last example from Obama, okay? And this comes from his debates with Romney. When Obama was running against Romney for president, Romney being from the Republican Party. And this is from 2012. Now, in these debates, and believe me, it'll be very interesting to see if Trump and Biden debate. That'll be a very interesting debate to watch. But come back to this. There are 3 debates. And the first debate, you can see how they're positioned. They're standing behind a lectern, and each of them positioned there and answering the questions and debating. The second debate was very different. It was what's called a town hall format. They ask questions, they get up and they answer questions and sit down when the other speaks and so forth. And then the third presidential debate was, they were sitting at the same table and the moderator is sitting there with them. All right, so the positioning is different. Now, the first debate, look at the polling. Who won the debate? The CBS News poll, Obama 22%, Romney 46%, 32% no opinion. CNN 25 to 67. The Gallup poll 20 to 72. Who won? Well, Romney. Romney won. One of the writers for Time magazine said this. It was, in fact, one of the most inept. You know what inept means, right? Really, poor, all right? Really unable to carry it out, all right? Inept performances I've ever seen by a sitting president. So Obama really didn't do well at all. Now, the third debate, we're going to skip the second one because that was a very different kind of format. The third debate, notice Obama did way better. 53 to 23. CNN polls, still, they weren't that far off, all right, 48 to 40, but still Obama did better, all right? What's the difference? Now, what I said to you at the beginning was that we are interested in how they differ aesthetically and functionally, right? Can we examine a text and say aesthetically it is better or worse? No, we're not going to make that judgment, okay? We're the scientist. We are the investigator. We're not going to make it about our own evaluation. We've just seen the evaluation of people. The first debate, Obama didn't do well. Third debate, he did much better. All right, so relying on that sort of response of the listeners in this debate, let's take a look at what might have been contributing to that response. That's what we are interested in investigating. Now, take a look. In the first debate, what was theme? I. And a lot of other things. Do you see we anywhere there? No. Third debate, I and we and you. All right, now, let's do a bit of calculating here. In the first debate, we never mentioned once by Obama. Romney, he was 32% we. I, 23% from Obama. Romney was 35%. Other. And notice something here. All right. Sorry, I read that wrong. That's for the first debate. I don't have the totals here for Obama in the third debate. I only have for, I don't have the totals for Obama in the first debate, only in the third debate. So I'm comparing Obama in the first and the third. Romney only in the third. All right. So for Obama, I have in the first debate, he never mentioned once. In the third debate, Obama 10 times. All right, 32%. In the first debate, 23%, 35% in the third debate. But I want you to notice something else, and that is in the first debate, 67% Obama, other things as theme. You know what I mean by theme. Now, in Obama's first debate, in the closing, just taking a look at the closing, you can see the nature of the things that were mentioned as sort of the topical, the ideas that were mentioned as theme. 4 years, my faith and confidence in the American future, the reason, the woman, the company, and so forth. Interpersonal, it's not you in the sense of addressing you. It's just when he signals a difference in sort of discourse, he begins sort of, it's a discourse marker. It's not related to what you, and not really related ideationally. And only toward the end of that closing in the first debate did he come out I, first person. Now compare that with the third debate. In the third debate, notice that it is a mixture of I and we. We occurs quite frequently. I, yes, throughout the speech. Now, the point that I'm saying is I'm not criticizing that Obama's use of the first person. I am criticizing the fact that he used first person to the absence of first person plural, yes. We connects with his audience, but I at the same time is also connecting. He's making it very personal. Now I want to illustrate this I want to show you the first debate and the third debate. I've muted the sound. You're not listening to the sound. I want you to look at the eyes. I want you to look at Obama's eyes. What do you notice? You notice that in the first debate, he doesn't look at the audience. He hardly looks at us at all. But in the third debate, do you notice that his eyes never once leave you? They never leave you. Now, partly it's the interpersonal meaning that is being communicated here. Yes, is through the eyes, through the facial expressions. But you see, it coincides with the choice of theme in the sense that theme, I, we, it was in that third debate. He made that connection with the audience. He made it very personal. It's him and it's us and together. And that connection with the audience is made through the eyes, but it is also made through his use of theme. Well, I have a bit more to say about this, but I think that it's about the only thing I wanted to mention. I'll end on this point. And in Obama's first debate, another thing that came through was usually we look at his sentences as being, we've commented that they are so eloquent, the use of parataxis and hypotaxis, right? Now here was a really complicated sentence, but this one had no clear paratactic or hypotactic structuring. It in fact had so much embedding of clause within a clause within a clause. Listen to it.
And so the question now is, how do we build on those strengths? And everything that I've tried to do, and everything that I'm now proposing for the next 4 years in terms of improving our education system, or developing American energy, or making sure that we're closing loopholes for companies that are shipping jobs overseas and focusing on small businesses, companies that are creating jobs here in the United States, or closing our deficit in a responsible, balanced way that allows us to invest in our future. All those things are designed to make sure that the American people, their genius, their grit, their determination is channeled, and they have an opportunity to succeed. And everybody's getting a fair shot, and everybody's getting a fair share. Everybody's doing a fair share, and everybody's playing by the same rules.
Now, yes, you can see this whole thing wraps up as the grammatical subject, all those things. That was the problem with his speech, and theme was all those things. Wasn't the connection. In a debate, you have to make a connection with your audience. You are trying to persuade them to vote for you. And in this case, I mean, in this sort of this first beginning here, which wraps up into one grammatical subject, all those things, is so complicated because it is so much embedding of clause, as I said, within a clause within a clause. Almost impossible to follow. Why systemic? Because what we're looking at is meaning. We're looking at the systems, the choices that are made, the systems of choice. And those choices relate to the three metafunctions that we've been talking about. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at texts, and what we're going to be saying is, how do those texts make meaning? And how do they do it in terms of what's the function that they perform? How can they be evaluated as being successful or not? And if they're not successful, if the audience doesn't respond the way that the speaker hoped, why not? How is it understood? And this is what we're looking at in terms of looking at text linguistics. So it will involve analysis of text in terms of the kinds of things that I've been looking at today. And if I've been able to make that case to you that it is important and it does help us understand how meaning was made and what that meaning was, then I hope you take the course. If you don't see it, if you're not interested in it, then of course you can drop it. And we'll decide how many members in each group. We'll decide that after we've finished the ad drop period and we know how many are remaining in the course, okay? So do let me know if you've had any questions or any problems. Feel free to, we'll end the session, and so the chat won't be there, but feel free to email me and contact me and ask me whatever questions you have. All right, so goodbye. Have a good day.